During the darkest days of the Cold War, the British government issued a series of public broadcast films called Protect and Survive. They told ordinary civilians that in the event of a nuclear holocaust, they could survive by hiding under their kitchen tables or by painting their windows white to reflect the thermal flash. It was absurd, but people believed it. However, the government knew the truth. If the bombs fell, the public would burn. That is why they were secretly building something else for themselves. Exactly 30 meters beneath the quaint English town of Corsham, the military carved out a colossal classified underground city. It had a hospital, a subterranean lake, a pub, and its own BBC broadcasting studio. This was Burlington, the top-secret doomsday bunker designed to keep 4,000 elite politicians and officials alive while the rest of Britain was turned to ash. And for 40 years, it was kept completely hidden from the world. The Home Office's official voice echoed through British homes with a message that was both calm and chilling. In the event of nuclear war, the government's guidance was simple. Stay at home, build a fallout room, and trust that a little preparation might be enough. Families were told to drag mattresses and doors into the hallway, to hide under kitchen tables as if wood and formica could stand against a nuclear blast. The pamphlet instructed people to paint their windows white with household emulsion, an act meant to reflect the thermal flash, as if a thin layer of paint could shield against the sun of 1,000 bombs. Stockpiling 14 days of water and tins of beans was presented as a lifeline. The advice was stripped down, almost mechanical. Seal the doors, turn off the gas, wait for the sirens. There would be no public shelters, no mass evacuation, only the illusion of control. The broadcasts and booklets carried a cold reassurance, the kind that leaves a knot in the stomach. Beneath the bureaucratic language, the underlying message was stark. Survival was now a household responsibility, and the state's protection ended at the front door. For millions, these instructions were not just inadequate, they were terrifyingly hollow. Inside the Cabinet Office and Ministry of Defence, the calculations looked nothing like the public message. Declassified files reveal that planners never expected the household advice to save the majority. Internal estimates from the early 1980s put the likely death toll from a large-scale nuclear exchange at 12 million civilians, above and beyond any direct blast casualties. The psychological burden was also weighed. Officials predicted widespread clinical depression, panic, and a breakdown in public order, even among those who followed every rule in the pamphlet. The idea of mass public shelters was dismissed as economically impossible. Memos argued that resources should be reserved for a central, hardened command centre, not for the population at large. By the late 1950s, the government had already authorised a parallel plan under a web of codenames, first Subterfuge and later Burlington. The secret was not confusion, but design, a separate survival track for the state itself. While millions were told to trust in emulsion paint and makeshift refuges, planners were building a city beneath the hills of Wiltshire, 30 metres underground, with the capacity to shelter 4,000 officials, complete with its own hospital, water supply and communications hub. The public was never meant to know. The arithmetic was private, the exclusion deliberate. Burlington was the answer to a question the public was never allowed to ask. 30 metres below the quiet streets of Corsham, an invisible city took shape in the cold limestone. The Ministry of Defence engineers worked without fanfare, carving out a world that most would never see and none were meant to imagine. Between 1959 and 1961, the old quarry was transformed. Its abandoned chambers were hollowed and reinforced into a labyrinth that sprawled across 35 acres. 60 miles of internal roads wound through the darkness, wide enough for lorries and emergency vehicles, mapped with military precision. The sheer scale defied belief. This was not a shelter hastily thrown together in panic, but a deliberate, meticulous construction, an underground metropolis designed to remain hidden from those living just above. The depth alone cast a kind of spell. 30 meters of solid rock, enough to muffle any blast, enough to make the entire operation invisible to the world outside. Here, planners were not improvising with kitchen tables or whitewashed windows. They were building a fortress, one that could swallow 4,000 people and keep them alive while the surface burned. The quarry's vastness allowed for entire streets, intersections, and zones, each engineered to support the machinery of government, not the needs of families. Every detail was calculated. The conversion of these ancient voids into a command center was a feat of state power and secrecy, a project whose existence would remain classified for 4 decades. While ordinary citizens faced the prospect of nuclear fire with little more than household paint, the government's answer was buried deep in the Wiltshire stone, a city built to outlast the unthinkable and to stay hidden from its own people. Life in Burlington was engineered to mimic normality, but under the weight of concrete and secrecy, diesel generators humming in their sealed chambers churned out power for 30 days without a break. Massive fuel stores lined the corridors, each one a silent insurance policy against the world above. Air did not simply drift in from the surface. Instead, it was forced through a labyrinth of filters, each designed to strip out radioactive dust and poison gas, feeding the bunker a measured, artificial breath. A subterranean lake, kept at a constant 20 degrees, supplied the water system. Every drop was treated, recycled, and rationed. The hospital, with its operating theatres and intensive care bays, stood ready for wounds no civilian shelter could hope to treat. Nearby, the Rose and Crown pub offered a facsimile of comfort, a bar built for officials who might never see daylight again. The BBC studio, sealed behind blast doors, was wired to broadcast the government's voice to a nation in ruins. Here, the state could speak with authority while the rest of the country waited in silence. Rows of bunk beds stretched along the dimly lit roads, each with its own reading lamp and locker. Kitchens the size of small factories stood ready to serve 4,000 meals a day. The underground telephone exchange, the second largest in Britain, linked the bunker to what remained of the outside world. In every detail, Burlington was less a shelter than a city, an imitation of routine life preserved for a chosen few, while the surface was left to chaos. The effect is haunting. A world built to endure the end of the world, but only for those deemed essential. Admission to Burlington was never a matter of luck or need. The doors were reserved for about 4,000 people, each one handpicked from the highest tiers of government and national service. Senior ministers, top civil servants, military commanders, and a small circle of scientists and technical staff made up the guest list, chosen not for who they were, but for their perceived necessity to the machinery of survival. The criteria were blunt. Only those deemed essential to running what might remain of the country would be allowed below. The rest were left outside, with the illusion of safety and instructions to whitewash their windows. No spouse, no child, no dependent was permitted entry. Even the names on the list remain classified to this day, locked away as tightly as the bunker itself. This was not a shelter for families or the vulnerable. It was a fortress for power, built on the idea that the state's survival mattered more than the lives of those it governed. The hierarchy was absolute. For the chosen, there was light, air, and order beneath 30 meters of stone. For everyone else, only the thin comfort of official advice and the knowledge that the blast doors would close without them. A city with no citizens still needed to be kept alive. For nearly 40 years, a small team of engineers and caretakers moved through Burlington's silent corridors, rehearsing for an arrival that never came. Their routines became rituals: beds made with fresh sheets, tins of food checked and replaced before their expiry dates, rotary telephones dusted and tested for a dial tone that no one would ever answer. Each week they walked the hospital wards, flicked on the lights in the underground pub, and flushed water through pipes that had never felt the press of a crowd. Maintenance logs record the endless cycle: filter changes, generator tests, inventories of untouched supplies. The caretakers became the city's only inhabitants, preserving the illusion of readiness for a world that might end at any moment. In their hands, the bunker's promise was kept alive, not for families or the vulnerable, but for an exclusive list that would never be posted on the wall. The exclusion was not just policy, it was practiced, day after day, in the eerie stillness of a city waiting for a disaster that never arrived. 40 years of silence hid a city, 30 meters deep, with beds for 4,000, a hospital, a pub, even a BBC studio, while families above were told to paint windows white and pray. When governments guard survival for the few, every table becomes a tomb. Some betrayals echo for generations.